시청자 여러분 안녕하십니까? 미시간주 유일의 한인 TV 방송 바르고 알찬 방송 뉴스포인트입니다. 이번 주에는 클래식 자동차 쇼 2013년 드림쿠르즈와 재미 한인 자동차 산업인 협회 Kpai의 커리어 세미나를 보내드리겠습니다. 뉴스포인트는 시카고 샤프 여행사 협찬으로 보내드립니다.
여기는 2013년 드림크루즈가 열리고 있는 우드워드 에비뉴입니다. 2013년 드림크루즈가 16일부터 미시간 넘버1 도로인 우드워드 에비뉴 선상에서 열렸습니다. 9마일 부분에서 14마일까지 걸쳐있는 우드워드 에비뉴에는 토요일 저녁까지 계속 몰린 인파와 전 미주 세계 각지에서 참여한 각종 클래식 자동차들로 붐볐습니다. 주최측은 드림크루즈 당일 훨씬 전부터 이 행사를 준비해왔고 우드워드 에비뉴에서는 각종 이벤트도 함께 마련되었습니다. 드림크루즈에서는 화려한 장식이나 희귀한 모델의 자동차도 종종 눈에 띄어 보는 이의 눈을 즐겁게 해주었고 시가지 전체가 거대한 자동차 전시장이 되고 있습니다. 의자를 들고 나온 사람들, 비치타올을 깔고 아예 편안히 들어누운 사람들, 어린아이 모두가 즐기는 클래식 자동차 쇼입니다. Yeah, you have a very nice car. What is it?
It's a 1961 Chevrolet Impala, a bubble top. It's got a 409, 4-speed, 2 4s, really fast, a lot of fun.
What is your name? Where you came from?
I'm Michael Conti. I'm from Bryan, Ohio.
Looks like inside and outside everything original.
It's a very original car, except for the motor. We've souped that up to make it fast and loud. So it's a lot of fun to drive.
Have fun.
Yeah, we're having a good time.
오하이오 주에서 온 마이클 칸티 씨는 1961년형 쉐볼레 엠펠라 버블탑을 가지고 나와 의장 내장이 전부 오리지널로 매우 잘 보관된 차라고 자랑했습니다. How was it today?
It was a very nice day. This cruise was very nice today. The weather was perfect.
You have a very nice car. Would you tell me about your car?
Thank you. It's a 1938 Plymouth business coupe. I've had it since 1985. When I got it, it was all original condition. It was running and I drove it around for a couple of years the way it was, but I always wanted to make a hot rod out of it, such as you see now. So it's been a labor of love and it's taken a lot of time, but I got what you see now. It's got a 318 Chrysler motor, a 904 Chrysler transmission. As it is, I think I told you, it's 1938 Plymouth business coupe. So it's all Chrysler underneath. And I have hidden hinges on the doors, which make them smooth. I have suicide doors. They open from the front to the back.
Oh, okay.
Open in the front. I've got the sunken parking lights in the fenders recessed. I've got 59 Cadillac recessed tail lights in the back. All the door handles, hood handle, trunk handle have been taken off. So it's smooth all the way around. And I've got a third brake light, which is below the rear window, and that is sunken in also, and it's very bright, as are the tail lights because they're LED lights, so very bright. The original lights weren't really bright, and if you stepped on the brakes in the daytime, you couldn't tell if they were on or not. But with the LED lights, they're very bright, so it makes it a lot safer that way.
Seems like you very enjoyed this car.
Oh yes, very into it, yes. I've had it since I told you 1985, and I have no plans of getting rid of it anytime soon.
Thank you. Enjoy the car.
Okay, thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
1985년에 구입한 1938년형 플리맷 비즈니스 쿱을 몰고 와 주차 후 다른 차들을 구경하러 나온 한 중년의 신사는 자신의 클래식 자동차로 운전하는 것을 즐기고 있다면서 부인과 함께 매년 우드워드 드림쿠르즈를 방문한다고 했습니다. 와우, automatic, eh? 와우, suicide door.
The other door would stay open if I popped it open.
Oh, okay.
Because the angle it's sitting on.
Oh.
You get the interior.
드림크루즈는 1995년 8월 한 축구장 모금 운동을 위해 50년대 60년대 클래식 자동차 행렬쇼를 넬슨 하우스와 그 그룹이 자원봉사 형식으로 처음 시작되어 그해 우드워드 에비뉴를 중심으로 약 25만 명의 관심을 모아 시작되었습니다. 오늘날 우드워드 드림크루즈는 하루에 가장 많은 클래식 자동차를 볼 수 있는 세계 제1의 역사를 기록하고 있고 모터3 본 고장으로서의 곽광을 받고 있습니다. 1.5 밀리언의 인파가 관심있게 관람 또는 행사에 참여하고 있으며 4만 2천 대의 클래식 자동차가 행렬에 참여하고 있습니다. 이상 우드워드 에비뉴에서 뉴스포인트 데이비슨입니다. 미시간 여름의 끝자락에서 개학 준비에 바쁜 학생과 학부모들이 노바이에 모였습니다. 22일 저녁 7시 노바이 바로네트 르네상스 호텔에서 영어로 진행되는 커리어 세미나에 참석하기 위해서입니다. 재미 한인 자동차 산업인 협회가 주최한 이 세미나는 미 주류사회에 진출해 있는 각 분야의 전문인을 초청해 학생들과 커리어 상담과 서로 간의 네트워크를 구축하는 연례 행사입니다. 이날 패널로는 훈영합구 미시간주 상원의원 전미은 변호사, 조니 박사가 초청되었습니다.
On behalf of G2 subcommittee and staff, I welcome you and I thank you for your participation. Kpai, just briefly, Kpai's one of key objectives is to contribute to the growth and success of the communities, especially for Korean communities. And then we take seriously doing these kind of activities, such as G2 Next Generation, this G2 seminar, scholarships for high school seniors, and fundraiser for schools and charity organizations and stuff like that. And this is one of them. And then we're very crucial activities of our Kpai. And then we take, I guess we measure the success of this seminar on how much you take and find the most beneficial. So thank you for again participating in this seminar. So enjoy the presentation and then think about some questions as well. So ask as many as questions you might have, and then if we need more time to cover your questions, we'll have them stay longer. So thank you very much and have fun.
입양아 출신인 합끝 의원은 자신의 성장 과정을 대략 설명하면서 어린 시절 따돌림 받은 경험, 한때 파일럿이나 투자가를 희망하기도 했으나 결국 정치인이 됐다고 말했습니다. 전체 시리를 통틀어 2-3명 정도 대학에 가는 시골 동네에서 자랐지만 양부모님이 모두 교육자이셔서 미시간 대학에 들어가 전공 과목뿐만 아니라 사회학 등 여러 가지 과목을 들었다고 말했습니다. 자신은 대학 때 선거 캠프에 참여해 도우면서 좋은 경험을 얻었다고 밝혔습니다. 그는 또 계속 치러내야 하는 선거, 해마다 달려지는 이슈를 접해야 하는 등 정치인 가족 배경이 없으면 매우 힘든 직업이라고 토로했습니다. 랜싱에서 처음 정치인으로 입문했을 때 밑바닥에서부터 배워나가야 했기 때문에 어려웠지만 그로 인해 많은 경험을 했고 커뮤니티를 위해 봉사한다는 생각으로 보람을 가지고 일하고 있다고
So I was
말했습니다.
adopted when I was 19 months old. Came over to Taylor, Michigan, and that's where Chris and Raleigh Hopgood, my parents, raised me. They took me into their home. My brother and sister were also adopted, so there's the three of us Asians in a predominantly Caucasian community with Caucasian parents. So that was a whole story in and of itself. It was a great experience. You know, I would have to say that I did get teased and things like that growing up. You know, unfortunately, you know, sometimes kids will find anything to tease anyone else about. So it's certainly not uncommon for kids to experience that. I experienced some of it, you know, but it in some ways, I guess it helped make me who I am and it helped make me strong, I think, but only because I had people around me that were supporting me as well. So that was a key part of my upbringing. But you know, my parents gave me the best upbringing that I could think that I could get, you know, and it's one of those things where I think that I had a lot of I don't know if you'll say needs or questions or whatnot, but when I came over here, you know, I was malnourished and things like that, and just got what I needed growing up and was able to have opportunities. I did go to the University of Michigan. That was like, we were talking, that was like the only university that I knew. I did fly somewhere else as like the backup, but if I got to Michigan, that's where I was going. You know, and I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do back then. There was a time when I wanted to be like a jet pilot, like a fighter pilot, you know, someone who was in like Top Gun and like, you know, shooting at the other airplanes and things like that. And that was probably when I was early teen years, you know, maybe junior high or something like that. But there was a time when I wanted to be kind of an investment banker, kind of stockbroker type person, and I actually got to go and spend a week with my uncle who was in that line of work, and it didn't turn me off at all. You know, I still had that interest. It just wasn't how things turned out. So my sort of inspiration and in many ways my influence in politics was from my dad. He was involved, so I really grew up around it, and that's a big part of my story. My brother and my sister, same household, same dad, really don't want much to do with politics at all. I mean, they're you know, it's a whole different alien thing to them. But for me, it was what I got involved with, and it was kind of natural. My brother ended up being an engineer, my sister ended up being a writer, so pretty different fields. But for me, you know, my dad was on city council in our community, so I had that first-hand experience kind of seeing him out in politics and doing things, and he instilled in me this strong civic responsibility. So that, you know, you grow up someplace and that's a part of your home, it's somehow a part of who you are. And you know, I think that in some ways comes natural, but because of his roles in community leadership and things like that, it left an extra impression on me. I think most of us, you know, you hear about people saying, well, I'm from this town or I'm from that town. Most of us have some sense of pride about where we come from. He just took it to the next level, and again was on city council. He was on the state board of education.
이어 전미은 변호사는 10살 때까지 캘리포니아에서 살다가 한국으로 가서 중학교까지 공부했고 다시 미국으로 10학년 때 건너왔다고 말하고 코넬 대학에서 비즈니스를 배우고 웨인 주립 대학에서 로스쿨을 나와 현재 상법 전문 변호사로서 활동하고 있다고 말했습니다. 코넬 대학에서 리테일을 전공해 어떤 일을 했는지 차근차근 설명해 주었고 형법과 민법이 어떻게 다른지 차이점을 설명하며 법 체계의 큰 그림을 참석한 학생들에게 보여주었습니다. 전 변호사는 1855년 캘리포니아 톨스로 상해법 케이스를 준비해와 학생들이 짤막하게나마 로스쿨 수업을 받는 느낌을 갖게 해주었습니다. 자녀가 어리기 때문에 가정과 직장을 병행하기 힘들지만 자신이 하고 싶은 일이라 일을 기쁘게 한다고 말했습니다.
Dr. Lee also went, and we literally did have to walk through snow very far distances just to get to class uphill, and suffered through the cold winters of Ithaca, New York. After I graduated, I joined the Bloomingdale's buying office, where I worked for about 4.5 years. And while I was working and living in New York, I met a fellow. He said he's from Troy, Michigan. And I said, well, where's that? And a couple years later, lo and behold, we got married. We had a brief stint in Boston while he got his MBA, but then we moved to Michigan. And I started law school when we got here. And a couple years later, I'm working now at Kemp Klein Law Firm in Troy, Michigan. So he really got his way with all that. So that all said, my two careers have been in the retail industry and in law. So I'll speak really briefly about the retail industry because it is a really fun area, and especially as a woman, I thought it was a lot of fun. It's very happening in New York, and I just thought it'd be a little insightful for anyone who's interested in sort of the fashion/retail area. So career-wise, I just divided it up into three sort of categories. There's product development, buying, and selling. This is just very generally speaking. Product development is what I think of as design and manufacturing. So those are, like your Calvin Kleins and Ralph Laurens of the world, people that come up with fashion designs and come up with the merchandise. And they are, people go to fashion design school for that kind of field of for that kind of a career. And then there's buying, and that's what I did. And buying can be subdivided into planning and buying. And planning is really the people that come up with the budgets. They look back at the history of how things sold. They come up with projections for going forward. They look at inventory, sales, turnover. This is all just kind of retail jargon. In the bottom line, they kind of come up with a plan for the buyer. And then the buyer is the one who actually goes and shops for the product. And so where I was at Bloomingdale's, so I'm buying for all of Bloomingdale's across the country. So, when you go to Bloomingdale's and buy a pair of jeans, that's because a buyer went out and bought 100 pairs of jeans from a vendor who did product development. So as a buyer, you kind of look at all the product that's out there, you interpret it to see which ones are on trend and fashionable, and yet things that will sell. Because if it's really just out there, no one's going to buy it. It might look pretty, but you also have to make money for the company. So you want to be able to sell what you buy. So you do fashion interpretation / merchandise selection is how I describe that. You also do the vendor negotiations as the buyer. So, whatever discounts you might be able to get. A lot of people want to be in Bloomingdale's, so there was, some strategies there. And then the last category that I listed is selling, where, it's kind of what people are most used to, where it's just, there's a store that deals with customers, that sells to customers. They do all the presentation of the merchandise, and a store manager's career would have a lot to do with store personnel and salespeople, stock people. So those are kind of the three categories that I could briefly describe for you. And if you have no questions on that, I'd be happy to answer anything in that area. Now I'm going to go into law because I think most parents at least brought you here to hear more about this side. And I divided legal professions largely into litigation and non-litigation. So litigation is what you think of when you first think of an attorney. It's the people that go to court, they have their clients, they're defending someone against another person, there's a judge. And non-litigation is also sometimes called transactional law. This is kind of more
forward thinking and counseling people so that they don't end up in court. So litigation is kind of problem resolution because you're there because there is a problem already. And non-litigation / transactional law is problem prevention. So you're really coaching someone through and saying, oh, this is your goal and let's see how we can get you there. And that's what I do. So going into litigation a little bit, because I don't do litigation, I probably, I'm not the best person to be explaining this to you, but again, very just largely and generally speaking, there's criminal law and civil law that gets involved. Criminal law, again, probably the most commonly understood field of law with public defenders or people who are just criminal defense attorneys because their clients could actually pay for an attorney, and there are prosecutors who are trying to enforce the law and I guess make sure that whatever punishment is due is given to that person. Then there's also civil litigation, and that's where an attorney will represent a client because there's a conflict with another party. And so this involves things like contract disputes. If two people come and say, we had an agreement, this is what we agreed to, and they need a judge to say, okay, this is the right answer. So there are attorneys that will represent, each side. Landlord-tenant, family law is also very big. Divorce cases, child custody cases, a lot of times judges have to get involved there. Probate is probably more of another legal jargon, but has to do with trust administration a lot of times, guardian, people who can't make their own decisions, so they need guardians appointed for them. But just regular business disputes, intellectual property, employment, and torts. And torts is another word that a lot of people are not familiar with. Anyone know what a tort is? No? It's in fact, you probably all know what a tort is, you just don't realize that it's called a tort. If you say anything about negligence claims or medical malpractice, sorry, Dr. Lee, we don't do any medical malpractice at our firm, so don't hate us. And let's see, product liability, a lot of those things are under the umbrella of torts. So I just thought of a really simple example to give you an idea. If there is someone who's supposed to maintain a street and they forgot to put a manhole cover over a manhole, and someone who's drunk is walking across, falls in the manhole because there's no cover, and hurts himself, who's right? Any guesses? No future litigators in the room? Well, this is what a judge said in 1855 in California. If the defendants were at fault in leaving an uncovered hole in the sidewalk of a public street, the intoxication of the plaintiff, the man who was drunk, cannot excuse such gross negligence. A drunken man is as much entitled to a safe street as a sober one, and much more in need of it. So he thought, it was actually the fault of the person who failed to cover the manhole. This is a very old case, as you can see, 1855. So things have changed a little bit, and I'm not sure that a case today would be quite this simple, and opinions, maybe not quite that simple anymore. And laws change too, so it's not always the same, but I just thought I'd give you an example of what a tort is, because I know you're all familiar with it. Okay, moving on to transactional law. And again, this is more of what I do. So you represent a client who has a business goal in mind, and you try to walk that client through all the legalities of reaching that goal. So for example, people who want to start a business, you say, well, should you start a corporation or should you start a limited liability company? And there are all these things and issues that you need to walk them through to come up with that decision. Owners of businesses, either shareholders or members, depending on what kind of organization. If a company wants to merge with another company or acquire another company, or if they just want to dissolve and say, I want to get out of the business. A lot of these business issues can be done by in-house counsel if the company's big enough. So a career path to think of is you can either work at a firm like I do and practice business law, or you can work for a company and that client would be your sole client, and you would help them with all the business issues that I list up top, or in addition, you might be also doing corporate formalities. If it's a public company with a lot of shareholders, then there are securities laws that you have to comply with. And a lot of times in-house counsel attorneys also deal with employment issues that happen within the company. All right, estate planning. This is another area that I practice a lot of. People who want to create wills and trusts, you know, people work really hard to create what they have and they want to see it go to the person that they want to leave it for. And so, you know, you walk people through whether they need a will or a trust, and sometimes tax becomes a deciding factor there. There's also power of attorneys and patient designations that get involved. When you can't make your own decisions, who would you want making your decisions for you? Your wife or your son, or you know, a really good friend of yours? And these are things that people set up so that they can kind of rest easy knowing that if something happens to them, things will be taken care of the way they would hope it to be. And other areas include tax, real estate, intellectual property, employment, antitrust, elder law, bankruptcy. And I don't know, if you're really into K-pop and you think you'd actually also be a really good attorney, you might consider entertainment law, you know. So you can apply law in a lot of different areas. And the bottom line is, I think as an attorney, you're advocating for your client. So, you know, what I think of as my job is I'm advocating for my client. Whatever the client's goal is, that's what I try to achieve for them. And that's it. No more PowerPoint present slides for me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
바로 이어 버만 병원에서 전문의로 일하고 있는 조니 박사는 시종일관 계속 웃는 얼굴로 자신의 스토리를 여유롭게 말했습니다. 어머니가 간호사이셔서 영향을 받을 법하지만 그는 물리학, 과학에 흥미가 있어서 메디컬 스쿨에 들어갔다고 말했습니다. 그는 학생들에게 지금 당장 진로를 결정하지 않아도 된다고 다소 느긋한 제안을 하면서 대신 이 일이 정말 하고 싶은 일인지 잘 할 수 있는 일인지를 스스로에게 끊임없이 물어보라는 주문을 했습니다. 메디컬 스쿨에 들어가기로 결정했더라도 그 과정을 즐기고 결과에 연연하지 말라고 하면서 의학을 공부하면 꼭 메디컬 닥터가 되지 않더라도 리서치 같은 다른 여러 분야에서 활동할 수 있는 게 장점이고 그만큼 기회와 선택의 폭이 넓어지게 될 것이라고 말했습니다. 아울러 그는 헬스케어도 비즈니스이기 때문에 환자를 대할 때 항상 친절해야 하는 서비스 정신을 강조하기도 했습니다.
I know that in law and also in politics you have a tremendous impact on people, but sometimes it can be more kind of diffuse. Whereas with the patient-doctor kind of relationship, you interact with people every day that you can see that you have a direct impact on. So that was something that also attracted me. Now, because of that, most of my classmates were not thinking of applying down to the States, but a friend of mine his father had graduated from Yale, so he was all set to go to Yale. So I thought, well, if he's going to write SAT, why don't I do it too? So that's what actually eventually led me to go to undergrad in the United States. Part of the reason why I chose Cornell was because of the fact that it has such a strong reputation of getting people into medical school. So that is one of the things too, is that if you are doing well now, that is a very good thing, because it's like building a house, right? That if you build a strong foundation, it makes the choices later much easier. Similarly, I always was bothered by people in undergrad when they said, I definitely know that I want to do X. How do you know that you want to do X? I mean, people, you know, that I know in senior, like in their senior year of undergrad decided, oh, I want to be, you know, in medicine, or I want to go into law. But the choices that they made early on are restricted. So what I would recommend is to stay broad-based. Make sure that you take at least 1 year of math, 1 year of science, 1 year of writing,
So that way, if you decide later on that you always, that your dream of always being like a pastry chef, that's not going to work, that you then want to go back, that you actually don't have to start from square one. But on the other hand, a friend of mine actually, it was interesting, he also wanted to be a doctor, but he met his future wife in the second semester of his freshman year, and his GPA went from 3.9 to 2. So he went from the dean's list to almost being put on academic probation. So he finally righted his ship, but it took him a year, and because of that, he was in his senior year and he didn't get any interviews at any medical school. But what he did was he then took an extra year and took a post-baccalaureate degree and then applied again. He didn't make it, but then he applied the following year and he made it. And actually he had some difficulty paying for it, so he went actually into the Air Force. And so he's actually a captain now. He's a surgeon, and he's practicing actually out west. So the reason why I tell you that, because I teach residents, at St. John's all the time. We have almost like 120 residents. Many of them actually decided to go into medicine much later. Some of them came from like actual medical schools like down in the Caribbean. Some of them come from DO schools. They're really bright people, but they decided later on to go into medicine. And because of that, so you can do it one of two ways. The easier path in certain ways is if you know early on and excel, and then it's easier that way. But I also want to point out that it is never a given that even if you struggle, that if you decide to keep going, there have been many, many cases that I can think of, colleagues of mine that decided later on that they wanted to go into medicine, and not necessarily even as a doctor, but that they actually succeeded. So that's an important thing too. The field is big enough right now and expanding that there's so many roles that you do not have to choose one versus the other. So that's what I would encourage you guys to do, is to be flexible, to excel at what you're doing, but then to not decide now that I want to be X, Y, or Z. Right? So then I went back to Toronto, and part of that was because of the fact that the University of Toronto at the time was $2,000 per year. It was very cheap. So part of that leads to a disadvantage in medicine because, as you can tell, it took me a long time to get to work. My parents were like, "Are you going to ever take us out to dinner because you're not working?" So you delay your entry for a decent amount of time, and unfortunately, many of my classmates actually at the University of Michigan had tremendous debt. So you also have to understand that you have to make wise choices, in terms of where you go to medical school and then to residency, and which subspecialty are you going to choose, if you choose one at all. Because the problem is that I can describe to you the way that medicine is right now, but who knows what it's going to be in 5, 10, 15 years? We don't know. I believe that the demand is going to be even greater, and that the capabilities are going to be even greater. It's amazing. We're in a very exciting time in medicine, especially with things like the Human Genome Project and all the things that we're learning about the human body. But on the other hand, you don't want to be completely bankrupted, when you finish your training. So you have to be wise going in and go in with open eyes. My mother was a nurse, and that partially influenced, my choice to go into medicine. But beyond that, I didn't really have major role models. You guys don't have that disadvantage. You have parents that are very involved, and you have resources here to go and see, is this for you, right? We have high school students, college students that shadow us, that actually come to the hospital and follow us, and to see, is this for me, right? Because you do not want to be in medical school and realize that this is not for me, right? Because you've gone already so far into this, right? So I would encourage you guys to also do that. So then you have to decide what you're going to specialize in, but it's for later. So really it comes down to what are the advantages of medicine. I would say that it's an exciting field in that right now the amount of information that we know about the human body is just increasing tremendously, and it's an applied field, so it's not theoretical. You use your information every single day. All the stuff that you learn, you apply, so it's kind of cool, and you have a direct impact, on people. But you also have to understand, though, that there are some disadvantages. One of them is that it may not be evident, but medicine is a service field most of the time, right? There are certain subspecialties where you never interact with patients, but in the vast majority of cases, you deal with people every single day. So you have to understand that, right? That you are in a service, industry. So therefore, you have to be professional. You have to smile. You have to be nice. You have to be understanding. Even when you don't feel like being understanding, you have to be understanding, right? You have to empathize, right? There are things that we tell patients that are shattering, right? Things that, things that can change their whole life. So you have to be there for them, even though you're thinking about something else or you're having a bad day, right? So that's the thing. If that is something that you enjoy doing, then it is possible that medicine is for you, because the fact that you will be able to interact with people every single day in the vast majority of things. But the other thing that's nice, as I said, is that medicine is such a large field that you can choose what you want. There are so many models now, right? Many physicians are actually salaried, right? So they don't have to worry about how much am I going to bill, but you just kind of do your hours and then you go and you work for people. Other people want to be self-employed, right? Either in by themselves or else as part of a large group. I'm part of a 14-physician group, and we're all the same specialty, and we all kind of cover one another. So that's a very nice thing. But you could do that. You could do research and actually be part of an academic university. You can do research actually for industry. There are other areas that you can use your actual medical knowledge. Similarly, it doesn't have to be a 9-to-5 thing, especially in primary care. For both men and women, there's such a high demand for really good people that most of the people that I know actually look for flex time. So even if you said, look, I can only work 3 or 4 days per week, I'm willing to make less money, but I want to spend this time, then most of the groups would say, no problem. We just track what you do. But that is a very, very nice thing that is not unique to medicine, but I see it much more available in medicine. So that's another thing. But I think that ultimately, one of the most important questions really is that do you see yourself kind of doing this long term? Unlike most, I think that I saw a statistic that the average American would change jobs between 3 to 4 times throughout their career, and often more than that, right? Most of the doctors that I know, they'll change positions, but they don't change what they do. This is something that is often considered a calling or something that you do long term. So you really have to decide early on if this is something that you would like to do. If it is, then it's obviously relatively competitive, but if you have a passion for it, I think that if you're wise in terms of the choices that you make, where you go, who you actually interact with, and also if you have a burning desire for it, then often you can go and get into where you want to be. So you have to go in with your eyes open. Now, one other thing too is that medicine now is also a business too, and I've never been more aware of that component than in the last 5 years. With the advent of the electronic medical record and all that, you have to be kind of a computer geek and also a business person and a healer all at the same time. So you need to go and see that so you can go in with your eyes open. So, overall, I mean, it's been my experience that the majority of people that that I interact with are pretty satisfied with the choices that they made, and it's just a thing of keeping your options open. Because the fact that you can want to do one thing, but then change in midstream, and even if you decide not to go into medicine, an overall science training will actually age you. So, I'm not sure if that answers it, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for sharing those words of wisdom and giving us a lot of information about the field of medicine and the things that you need to do to prepare to be a doctor. I think we'll go ahead and just take maybe a 10-minute break, have some refreshments, and then we'll get into the panel discussion and Q&A session. So get those questions prepared. Okay, we'll break for 10 minutes. Thank you.
A question to Senator Hapgood. What do you see yourself 10 years from now?
That's a very, very good question. So in Michigan, we have a term limits law. So you can serve 3 times in the House for a total of 6 years. So I did that. You can serve 2 terms in the Senate for a total of 8 years. So I'm in my first term, and so I have 1 more term available to me, which gets me out about 5 years. So sometime within that 5-year period, I have to think about what might be out there. Politics is kind of a crazy field where you don't know what's around the corner. Some other fields you can kind of plan things out a little bit. Politics, you know, things kind of come at you sideways and knock you off your best laid plans, but at the same time, there could be opportunities out there that you didn't even know about, you know, the year before. And so that's one of the kind of exciting but also unsettling things about politics. I mean, it's kind of this uneven career, and for lots of people, it's like, as I said before, it's like a second career, or it's like you know, you do it for a little bit and then you go back to the original career and that sort of thing. So, you know, I love what I do. I enjoy what I do very, very much. And so I would look for, at this point, I would look for opportunities to do these sorts of things. And I don't, like I said, I don't know what that would be. But at this point, I would like to try to continue in public service.
Seems like you guys are all like really successful, happy people, which I totally aspire to be. And this question is actually aimed towards Ms. Chan. So it seems like you've been working for the Bloomsdale Buyer's Office and you're doing law for 5 years. What made you change and switch and go back to law school like that? I mean, it just seems like a very drastic decision to make.
Yes, and I get that question an awful lot. I actually took 2 law classes as an undergrad, and I really enjoyed them both. And so I wanted to go to law school, but I didn't want to be in school right after undergrad. So I wanted to work in what they call the real world a little bit, and so that's what made me decide to actually join the Bloomingdale's buying office instead of going straight to law school. So that was the other option, was to just go straight to law school. But I'm really glad that I did the buying program, because I can now practice law with that business experience under my belt, and it helps a lot. And you know, I actually meant to go back to law school a little sooner. I didn't mean to stay at Bloomingdale's quite that long, but I had a very good support system, and I was actually getting promoted almost once a year. And so I just, you know, I didn't want to just stop just for the sake of going back to school at that point. And so I, you know, achieved what I wanted to there. And then at that time, it kind of happened to be when I got married as well, and we moved out of New York. And then when we came to Michigan, I finally went back to school and went to law school.
So I already asked you guys a bunch of questions, but I'll go ahead and ask another one. Aside from grades, what do you think makes a really potential and strong candidate for medical school, law school, or I guess there's a lot of high school students here, so undergrad?
Dr. Lee?
That's an excellent question. I mean, this is probably true for undergrad too, that with the number of applications that are now kind of hitting, whether it be undergrad or most of the professional schools, grades are the first I guess, obstacle. And unfortunately, really good candidates may be lost, you know, because of the grades. After that, I mean, certainly any unusual experiences, research opportunities. The thing is that, especially for Asians, like, we're almost expected to have like a lot of those things, so it's kind of like difficult to really stand out. Once you get the interview, though, I think that just being yourself, being honest, that really does help me. I'm part of the residency application process, you know, for our program, and most of the applicants have great paper, things in terms of recommendations, grades. But when you get to that stage, which, you've already, unfortunately, if you don't have the paper things, then you can't get to that stage. But like once you get to that stage, then it is more to do with your personality and just, being yourself. I think that helps too.
Then do you think for work experience-wise, do you think that to go to medical school, the most valuable experience would be related to the medical field, or do you think work experience in general is just really valuable to a person, for like a candidate?
So, as I said, like one of my partners is on the admission board for Wayne State University Medical School, and overall, it's not like research and things like this. It's just people that like seem to have. I mean, the things that stand out to them are like certain unusual volunteer work and things those things that they talk about. I mean, obviously, the top candidates get it just based on their straight grades, right? But then the people that are in that more of a gray area, those are the things that really separate them. And then it really is the interview often, and they often interview them twice, that really separate out the people that they'll accept.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? While you're preparing those questions, maybe I'll ask a follow-on question, Dr. John. Kind of related to the last question, are you finding more people going into the medical field later in life as a second career? Because it seemed like before people go to undergrad and they go straight to medical school and then become a doctor. What's your experience on that?
In comparison to when I'm pretty old, but I mean, so when I was applying, I think that there are more mature candidates. I think too that it's cyclical, at least for medical school. I'm not sure, like for law school, but certainly with the actual economic downturn, about like 5-6 years ago, the number of applications to medical school spiked. And then, so typically during more unstable economic times, medicine is viewed as a very kind of stable career, so the applications go up, and then as things kind of get better, often they drop down. So I don't know if that answers your question, but overall, I know that certain medical schools are looking for candidates that have some life experience, and that it seems that they want diversity even within the medical school class itself.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, just another question. Just to clarify, so like I said, I'm an undergraduate right now, and so you were saying that to go to medical school doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a biology major or whatnot, and you're allowed to stray from the path of a typical medical student, and as long as you have the basic requirements to go to med school, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, even when I was applying, I mean, the people that I interviewed with made it very, very clear that they basically use the pre-med classes and your MCAT as the initial kind of obstacle, right? The actual, like a cutoff. Outside of that, any major, it does not have to be, I said, like, I was the classic biology major, but you do not have to go into biology or even a science necessarily to actually apply. So that, I mean, when I look back at my life, I've been really fortunate not to have much in the way of regrets. But the one thing that I would really recommend to anyone is to enjoy the journey, in that there are people that I know in medicine and also in other fields that look to a goal, like I want to make my first whatever by this age, I want to be this successful by this age, and they'll put themselves in positions and sacrifice constantly, which is, I mean, everything great needs a certain level of sacrifice, but you need to enjoy the journey, like through every stage, both high school, undergrad, further training, like whether it be internship or all that. Because there are going to be tough days regardless, right? No matter what you do, there'll be bad days. But you have to at least enjoy the majority of the days. So that's at times what I see people that become embittered, at least in medicine, is that they never enjoyed the journey. So now how should I put this? The the trappings of success are more important than the actual work. If you get to that point, then that's bad. So that's what I say to myself. And I think I did that mainly, but I think if I'm more aware of it, to choose that, I think that'd be important.
What did you think of today's seminar?
I thought it was a really useful seminar, and it gives everyone a good idea about what each individual is doing, and I think it opens a lot of doors for kids to look into the future before college.
Hi, what is your name?
I'm Yemin Lee.
What did you think of today's seminar?
이런 영감신 분들을 만나서 영광스럽고 자신의 꿈을 위해서 항상 나아가고 자신이 하고 싶은 목표를 위해서 항상 노력하는 모습이 좋았어요.
What is this event today?
오늘 이벤트는요, 저희 Kpai가 지역사회에 공헌하고 특히 한인사회에 공헌하려고 그러는 일환의 하나로서 제가 갖고 있는 그 연례 행사입니다. G2 세미나, 그리고 장학금을 지원하는 장학 프로그램, 그리고 펀드레이징을 해서 학교 이런 것에 지원하는 그런 사역을 저희가 하는데 그 중에 하나가 G2 세미나입니다. 그래서 오늘은 훈영 합굿 미시간 상원의원하고 그 다음에 미스 닥터 존 리 메디컬 닥터 그리고 미시스 글로리아 천 변호사 이렇게 세 분을 모시고 학생들한테 어떻게 하면 공부하는데 도움이 될 수 있을까, 그리고 그들의 커리어를 결정하는 데 도움이 됐을까 하는 그런 내용으로 저희가 오늘은 세미나를 가졌습니다.
청소년기에 무슨 일을 해야 할지 말아야 할지 하는 끝없는 선택의 과정에서 Kpai에서 마련한 커리어 개발 세미나를 통해 많은 것을 얻어가길 기대해 봅니다. 노바이에서 TV 뉴스포인트 데이비신이었습니다.
뉴스포인트는 시카고 샤프 여행사 협찬으로 보내드립니다. 광고 문의나 업체 탐방 문의는 미시간 코리안 타임즈 detkr.com 또는 mktimes.com을 참고해 주시기 바랍니다. 여러분의 많은 성원 바라며 다음 시간까지 안녕히 계십시오.